And there's no real singular reason why people end up being transphobic, but there's a lot of things that contribute to it. And the GOP and conservative punditry in general, they like easy targets. So we got to talk about this one. This one's a bit important given what has been going on politically lately. We need to talk about why trans people are being targeted, like the underlying logic of why they have been picked. And you can link it to me, Zaxton, why they've been picked as the targets for the time being. We'll get into that, but first, let's get into the fan art section, and then we will be able to cover all of that madness here in just a second. As soon as I can scroll up to where I am in the fan art, because Discord is dumb and does not keep my place when I leave it. There we go. This first one is from Nemesis420. Happy birthday, Suris. Recently started drawing again and wanted to do some fan art for you because I've been enjoying drawing again after nearly 20 years of not picking up a pencil. It warms my heart. It literally warms my heart every single time an artist tells me that, like, my character's design or encouragement of artists or anything, really, has made them pick up the pen and start going at it again, start exploring that skill of theirs again. Honestly, I don't know how better to explain how that makes me feel. The art's also really good, but I'm glad that more people are able to get into doing artwork. The next one we have here is from... Better Suris could rotate it correctly? Yeah, but I can't. The next one is from Sylvia Silica. Happy birthday, Suris. Everyone I could fit came to the party. Timer-kun is lucky. Hold on, let's go ahead and scroll this out. There we go. Boom. Timer-kun is lucky to have gotten a plate, and Cassidy stayed around a little longer. I like how Suris isn't just turned into Cassidy after a while. That's just a thing that ended up happening in Sylvia's version of the lore. So we got Timer-kun, we've got Cassidy, we've got Hol-chan, Nova, and Dryer-kun. I guess on his side at that point. As always, or that's the washing machine. As always, everybody, thank you all for your fan art submissions, plural, multiple of them. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, please hit the bell notification icon, and let's go ahead and get into things. So, we gotta talk about a couple of things here. We gotta talk about transphobia, and we gotta talk about why trans people have been targeted. Now, it would be very easy for me to say that, oh, well, it's because of Chris Rufo. Right? Chris Rufo is the reason that we had so many people going after critical race theory for the longest time. He selected that as the target for the conservative conglomerate to go after. And as a result, that became the topic of conversation for the longest time. But that was because that target was selected after the George Floyd protests. Everybody had race on their mind, so making sure that race was what people were attacking just worked out politically. It's a real cruel way to look at it, but it's also a real cruel way to operate. When we're talking about transphobia, though, and why there has been so much more, at least vocal, online and showcased transphobia in recent years, we got to talk about what it is and, honestly, why trans people have been targeted. Most of this is going to seem like common sense, but if you're one of those people who, say, considers themselves to be apolitical and largely does not engage in political discourse, this video might actually be a decent primer for you. Now, when I use the word transphobia, I'm not using the word to mean fear, obviously. Anybody who says that transphobia means fear of trans people is a pedantic idiot who doesn't know how words work. Words don't have inherent meanings. Words have usages that we apply to them. The common usage for transphobia is that, well, it just means an aversion to or prejudice to trans people. It's a complex and multifaceted phenomenon, and there's no real singular reason why people end up being transphobic, but there's a lot of things that contribute to it. And the GOP and conservative punditry in general, they like easy targets. Critical race theory is an easy target because nobody fucking understands it, and everybody had Black Lives Matter on their mind in 2020. So critical race theory became a very easy target. What about trans people? Because that's the current target right now. Well, to understand that, it may help if we look at some of the previous targets in the past. While not being as actively targeted now, there was a point in time where gay people were the primary target for the GOP, or just conservatives in the United States, because it's not always the grand old party. Not all the time. So let's specifically get into why gay people were targeted. Well, it was because it was easy. Most people are cis and straight. And because most people are cis and straight, most people don't understand why somebody would like someone of the same gender. And that's what a lot of it comes down to. They don't understand it. They don't get it. They don't see the appeal or the reasoning. Now, aside from the obvious answer that if a girl finds a guy appealing, then another guy who normally finds guys appealing might find the guy appealing, that's a simple answer. And that answer is, while largely correct, not something that most people who end up being homophobic think about. So telling people that, hey, gay people aren't fit to raise kids, specifically because common sense says that a child needs a mother and a father, it becomes really easy to get people who are apolitical to just agree with the statement, a kid needs a mother and a father. When you agree with that statement, implicitly, you're saying that it's better for a kid to have a mother and a father than two mothers or two fathers. Now, most people understand that that's not really how that works. As long as two parents are working well with a child, then the child is going to be raised up well. That's how parenting works. It has nothing to do with a mother or a father. It has to do with those social roles being filled. A father figure and a mother figure that are in the same house as the child. Now, if you can get people to agree with that, though, it becomes very easy to get people to agree that it's maybe not prudent for gay people to be able to adopt. And then if you can say, hey, what's the point of marriage? Well, it's a legal incentive for people to breed so that they can produce more people that will produce tax dollars. At a base level, that would imply that there's no reason for gay marriage to be a thing, because if you've already agreed that gay people don't really make the best parents compared to straight couples, and you've already agreed there's no reason for them to adopt as a result of that, it's not a really far stretch to say, hey, why should they benefit from marriage? If marriage is an incentive that is supposed to be given to a particular group of people that these people don't fit into the category of. This is ignoring the religious reasons. Obviously, there are people who will come up with the immediate God made marriage and God doesn't like the gays, so the marriage institution isn't for the gays. That's an obvious route that you'll see homophobes take if their homophobia is rooted in religiosity. But I'm talking about the language that can convince just, again, standard, apolitical, agnostic people. So you're saying throwing Pokeballs at transphobic people is okay? You wouldn't want to catch them. You wouldn't want to catch them. Now, because that's such a very easy logic tree to fall down, you can see how that can very easily convince even people who would consider themselves progressive, as long as you get them in the right time period. So, what about black people? What about the discrimination against black people? It really wasn't that many generations ago that we actually banned interracial marriage, and it wasn't that many generations ago that we had segregated schooling. If you simply say the statements, people get along better with their own kind, most basic people will agree with that statement even today. So is it any wonder that it was only a couple hop, skips, and jumps away from that statement to get somebody to agree to segregate a school, or to get people to agree that white and black people shouldn't marry? Just like with gay people, it's only a couple logical leaps. There's only a few logical leaps you have to take to be a bigot. It doesn't take much. And it's that simplicity that conservatism has classically preyed upon. Simple answers to simple questions that lead you down simple roads to incorrect answers. So let's loop it to trans people. Most people have a lack of understanding of what being trans even means. Many people are just kind of defaultly transphobic because they don't understand what it means to be trans. It can be from a lack of education, it can be from a lack of exposure, it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, people just don't understand it. They don't get it. Put a pin in that. Secondly, there's honestly religious and cultural beliefs. You may not be religious, but you may be a person who lives in a country that is predominantly religious, like the United States. We have Christianity as the culture here. Whether or not you are individually Christian, whether or not you are individually any particular religious affiliation. Some people's religious and cultural beliefs make it so that gender is an immutable binary construct that has been affirmed by God since he created one man, one woman. This has been the same logic that has been used against gay people. Gay people shouldn't marry because Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Trans people shouldn't exist because it was Adam and Eve, not Adam and Adam, who happened to have a pussy. Pin in that as well. One of the other reasons people end up being, again, defaultly transphobic. Not people who are sitting there being maliciously transphobic, just people who are existing in the real world and just happen to have transphobic beliefs just in the back of their brain. Fear of the unknown. I talked about lack of education, but somebody who's trans challenges your ideas about gender norms. That can be really unsettling for a lot of people. And that fear usually will lead to a negative response from people. What do I mean by that? So let's say that you're looking at a really, really just flat-out, drop-down, gorgeous woman. She's a 10 out of 10 in your personal book of things you use to decide how attractive a woman is. You see her, and she is just everything. She checks every single box. She speaks to you, and her voice is deep and sultry, and you are intrigued, you are enthralled, and then you find out she has a penis. You've never encountered this scenario before. How do you respond? Some people respond with curiosity and begin exploring. Some people immediately associate genitalia only with, well, gender and sex. They haven't divorced those ideas in their head. So now, every single thing that is making this person attractive to you is flipped on its head, and you don't know how to feel. Do you find a guy attractive now? Are you gay now? What the fuck is wrong with you? These are the thoughts that go through your head. The reality is, gender is a pretty fluid concept, and so is sexuality. And liking who you like doesn't matter. You should just like who you like regardless of what label you think that puts on you. We only use labels as shorthand descriptors anyway, but that's not what goes through your head. What goes through your head is an identity crisis. That causes an adverse response when you go through that identity crisis. What else, though? What other reasons would people just be baseline transphobic? Well, if the representation in media has not been that great, then that would probably lead to it as well. I have a question. If I were to start talking with a lisp and I started crooking my hand at 45 degrees when I spoke, what stereotype am I currently acting out? Well, it's the stereotype of a gay man. And that stereotype has been that's not autism, the Nubian. The lisp is not. No, that's the gay stereotype. That's Hollywood's gay stereotype from like 15 years ago. The gay stereotype was built so that we could code somebody as gay immediately without having to be explained to us that the character's gay. They acted more effeminate. They spoke with a bit of a lisp. Their hands moved in odd angles. These were the ways that we would look at somebody and go, ah, yes, that is the gay person there. Now, the reality of being gay is that there is no signifier that somebody's gay. When you go outside and you see people, there can be somebody who's bisexual or completely straight who happens to have all of those exact same qualities, and there can be somebody who looks like the straightest lumberjack manly man possible, but they're just a bear, and believe me, they do pound other men on Tuesdays at the bar. You have these stereotypes in your head because media builds them that way, because it's easier to write certain characters that way for, lazy artists. It's easier to make those characters that way. So you get that representation in media. So what's the representation of trans people in media? What characters pop into your mind immediately? Well, honestly, trans people in media, while a more recent phenomenon, were previously represented mostly by cross-dressers. You would think of the Buffalo Bills of Hollywood. You would think of characters who were psychopathic, who cross-dressed as a way to get close to their victims. There's even one very transphobic author who happened to write an entire book based on that premise for reasons we could get into in a completely different video. When your only exposure to trans people has been media like that, that's what you think of, your subconscious will immediately put a negative representation of that person, irrespective of how attractive you may find them. Aaron, it's J.K. Rowling. It's J.K. Rowling. The author is J.K. Rowling. I'm just going to play the Cat Icarus clip. J.K. Rowling! When you have negative representation in media, or when you have biased representation in media, that's the only thing that comes into your head. So when you're met with somebody who doesn't fit those stereotypes, but nonetheless still has those descriptors, you once again find yourself having that negative reaction. This is somebody who's not confirming your bias anymore. This is something that goes against that, and it's weird and scary and strange. This can feed into your own personal biases, your own prejudices that you have deep down based on everything I've described so far. They contribute to just being transphobic without actively being so. It just happens to be that way. Just like somebody who just latently believes in the back of their mind that their race is better behaved than another race, historically speaking. That is a racist person, but that person would likely not call themselves a racist. They would probably call themselves a race realist or a normal person. But it is racism. And in the examples I've given before, it is transphobia. So why do I bring up all that? Well, because all of that sounds like stuff that can be easily baked into somebody's head without any real effort. Those are just baseline beliefs that a lot of people who are growing up in the United States, for instance, will have in regards to trans people. Because of that, you know what that makes them, right? Easy targets. The easiest targets are the ones that require the most education to understand. You may have a breadth of knowledge on how puberty blockers work, phalloplasty and vaginoplasty, vaginoplasty. You may have a sweltering of information you could give somebody about how the various different techniques for top surgery and how hormone therapy works and which different dosages will cause the body to respond in different ways and the different social methods people might use to androgenize themselves. You may have all this information and it may seem so simple and easy because you know it. But I guarantee you 99% of people don't. They don't know those things. They aren't educated on trans people and how they operate. Many of them might even be trans medicalists because they think that it's only with surgeries and hormone therapy that somebody's truly trans. It can be wrong for a variety of reasons. But most people do not have that base knowledge. So what'll happen is things that seem very obvious to somebody who's very invested in the idea of trans rights and advocacy, those things do not come as easily to somebody who's just transphobic. And again, we're not talking about people who are maliciously transphobic, just people who happen to have that in the back of their brain. Those people are what we would call prey. They are people that conservative punditry can exploit. They've already got that baseline bias that's built into them because that's how we exist in America, sad to say. All it takes is exploiting that. Take that fear of the unknown. Take that lack of understanding. Take those ingrained religious beliefs. Take that negative media representation that they're used to. Feed into it. And when you feed into it, you create a bigot. Somebody goes from just being prejudiced as their default state because that's how they grew up to being an actual bigot. You make somebody willing to engage in action based on those beliefs now. Once you do that, now they will support you financially because now you sound like a hero who's saving them from the unknown, saving them from the Buffalo Bill, saving them from the thing tainted by Satan in your religious culture. As disgusting as it is to think about, the reason that trans people are the target right now is because they are just an easy target. It is laziness on the case of the GOP. They lost the battle with black people in the United States. They lost the battle largely with gay people in the United States. Now they're going for the next thing. Black people were an easy target because people were already coded for the longest time to see those racial differences as hierarchical, and that whichever one they belonged to was necessarily the correct and better one. Gay people were an easy target because we could point to things like the AIDS crisis and blame it on them. We could point to things like them not being able to bear children in the ways that straight people commonly understand it, as ways that their relationship style is inferior and therefore they shouldn't have all the same rights as straight couples. They were an easy target when prejudice was built more on them. And right now, that prejudice is mainly sitting on trans people. The negative commentary has always been there, but it's never been in the forefront the same way it is right now in this moment. Currently, trans people are the primary target of conservative punishment. And again, it's largely because it is so easy to feed into those prejudices. I guarantee you, half the people in my audience have lived through everything I just explained. The fear of the unknown where a trans person is concerned, lack of understanding and education, maybe even some religious beliefs. I guarantee you every single person, at least those three, most of the people in my chat, have dealt with those themselves at some point, in some fashion, at some level. It is just that common. And because it's that common, it's that easy for the Shapiros and the Walshes and the Tucker Carlsons to grab that, mold it into something, and build a bigot. It is very easy for them to do it. And it's generational. If you have those beliefs, and they are not something you actively rail about, they're just a thing that you believe and you act accordingly as a result of that, what beliefs do you think your children are going to have? Probably something similar. While we tend to rebel against the strongest aspects of our parents as we grow up, we also tend to settle into the most minute ones. So, what do? I think the easiest way to help somebody who is transphobic realize what they're doing is to first recognize that they're operating oftentimes off of base, back-of-the-mind, subconscious biases. Addressing those biases can help. Honestly, the biggest help you ever have is exposure. Trans people are such an easy target because there's not that many of them in the United States. There's less than 1% of the U.S. population is trans, 1.6 million to the 330 million people in the U.S. This means the likelihood that somebody is going to interact with a trans person on a day-to-day basis is actually pretty low, especially in rural areas. As a result of this, it's not only an enemy that conservatives can build up in the mind of a bigot, but it's also an enemy you're likely not to encounter all the time. So it's easy to keep that prejudice in your mind and never have it challenged. Because challenging it, well, that happens when you're exposed to somebody who's trans. When your child comes out as trans. When someone you love comes out as trans. When somebody who you're dating discovers an aspect of their gender identity that might not make you the most comfortable. That's usually when people start having to reassess their positions on trans people. When somebody in their life is that. When now they're not an enemy they can poke at, person they have to contend with. I don't have a perfect formula, and nobody has a perfect formula for changing a bigot into a better person. The human mind's just not that simple. But I know the things that work best tend to be exposure. They tend to be slow and deliberate, because that's how that transphobia developed in the first place. It was slow. It was subconscious. The deliberation happened when a pundit decided to latch onto that and use it as a weapon. I wish we didn't live in a world where trans people had to deal with the amount of shit they have to deal with right now, the amount of laws that are written about them that are written about right now. But we've only got the world we have. So since we are in this world, if we're going to be advocates, the best thing we can do is figure out why a bigot ticks. It's going to be different for every person. And a lot of these conversations tend to be individual and uncomfortable. But oftentimes in those individual one-on-one conversations, that's where you will find the most headway. That's where you'll find the most humanity. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Maybe you've got a better path forward than I do. Maybe yours is more immediate and solves more problems than mine does. Let me know. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already. And let's try to make the world at least a marginally better place. As always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here.